Women's Health Institute. Today I'm talking about viscera. Another name for viscera is organs, and that might be the name that you know. So when we think about our organs, we think about what they do. So we have organs that help us breathe, we have organs that help us digest food, we have organs that help us think, we have organs that help us reproduce, we have organs that help us get rid of waste. That's awesome. But they actually do more than that. They actually are part of the infrastructure of our body. They help everything else stay in place and do its job structurally. So the organs are very, very forgiving if they aren't moving right or positioned right. Their actual physiologic function very commonly is still pretty darn good. Lots of forgiveness in the body. However, there's less forgiveness in the structural system of the body if an organ is not properly moving or in proper optimal positioning. So in the Burrell technique of visceral manipulation, we listen for two things. One is mobility and the other is motility. So mobility are the gross movement patterns of an organ. So let's say the lungs, right? So when you breathe, you have expansion of the lung fields, expansion of the chest cavity, depression of the respiratory diaphragm into the abdomen, and then movement of the organs because of that depression of the respiratory diaphragm. So that would be an example of mobility of the lungs. We also have another more subtle movement pattern that we look at, which is called motility. Motility is the embryologic movement pattern of the organ, a subtle pattern that we listen for with our hands. And essentially, it tells us, Dr. Burrell says, how happy the organ is doing its job. And you want happy organs doing their job. And so if we have proper motility, they're happy. Their job is easeful. It feels good and right. And so much of the work that we do combines working with the mobility and motility of the organs. So one of the things that kind of got me started on this was my own chronic right SI pain. I did not have an injury. I did not have an accident. This came on gradually over time. And for years and decades, I got care. I got chiropractic and massage and acupuncture and exercise and stretching and building muscle tone. And still, I had that chronic SI pain. Nothing made it go away. Maybe I got some relief with the care that I did get, but it wasn't permanent. Nothing made it go away permanently. And then I heard about Arvigo Maya abdominal therapy. And I said, wow, what's that? I gotta get me some of that. So Arvigo Maya abdominal therapy is a form of visceral manipulation that it comes out of traditional Maya medicine, Maya manual medicine. So the story is that my teacher Rosita was trying to avoid the draft of the Vietnam War, and so went down to Belize with her husband and set up shop down there. They were naturopathists, and that's a kind of doctor that they don't make anymore, but it was basically a kind of natural practitioner in the 60s. And so they set up shop down there, and one day someone came in and was looking at all the things that they had in their shop, and they said, "Oh, what is this? Teach me that. What is this?" That's what the visitor said. And Rosita recognized him as Don Eligio, the famous Maya healer. And she said, "Wait a minute, why are you asking me questions? You're the famous healer. I want to study with you." And he said, "No." And he left. And Rosita was like, I really want to study with him. And so she went to his house and knocked on his door, said, "Hello, Rosita, do you remember me from the other day? I want to study with you. I want to learn everything." And he said, "No, go chop my wood." And she said, "Okay." And so she went and chopped his wood. And the next day she came back. "Hello, I want to study with you." "No, go wash my clothes." And so she went and washed his clothes. And every day she'd come back until finally she wore him down. And he said, "Okay, I'm going to teach you, but only because nobody else wants to learn. And it's really important that we pass on this information. I don't want it to stop with me. And so you have to make a pledge that you're going to pass this information on to as many people as you can." So she made that pledge, and that's what she's done. She spread it all over the world. So when I took my classes of Maya abdominal therapy, I began to realize, wow, the organs really can have a big impact on what's going on in the musculoskeletal system. I wonder if my chronic SI pain could actually be related to my uterus. And so part of the deal with getting these classes was to get a treatment from someone who really knew how to do it. And so she did my assessment, and she was like, "Wow, your uterus is way tipped back and falling back onto your right side of your pelvis." And I was like, wow, okay. And she did her treatment, and she got that uterus up and going. And man, I felt real bad for a few months because I'd had a lot of scars and adhesions, and then inflammation when the uterus got back up in place. And then eventually I didn't have that pain. I still had to deal with a lot of instability of the uterus, and at that point I didn't really understand how to deal with it. I had to practice on myself, try to figure out what's going on, take more classes, the Burrell technique to figure out what all the ligaments do, how to deal with those, figuring out for myself, the vascular component, the lymphatic component, how everything is put together so that the body can be pain-free. And so now I don't have that right SI pain. And I started, what happens a lot of times when you're doing manual medicine is that at some point the body will be like, "Let me tell you my story. I'm going to tell you how this all started." And so at one point, working on my uterus, all of a sudden I had this memory of being a kid, about 10 years old, riding a horse, getting bucked off the horse, falling flat on my back. And my body was just telling me "Oh yeah, this is when this happened. This is when your uterus got kicked back decades ago." And that is the nature of the sort of voice of an organ that is not functioning properly as far as mobility or motility is concerned. There's no immediacy to it. Very infrequently is there immediacy to it. Oftentimes the symptoms are delayed. The symptoms are delayed because the organ speaks out through the vascular system and the lymphatic system, which means that they compress the venous return or the lymphatic channels, and that then causes congestion, and that then causes pain. So that these things, because the body is just so well adapted, it's so forgiving, it will put up with a lot before becoming symptomatic. And so the organs many times are going to be involved in chronic musculoskeletal pain that has not been responsive to chiropractic, acupuncture, and massage. But treating the organs themselves is not enough. you have to then get into that vascular and lymphatic system very commonly. When I was taking the Arvigo myoabdominal therapy trainings, one of my teachers got a treatment so that we could see, how a professional does it, so we could all observe. And so when she laid down to get her treatment, she was like, oh yeah, my uterus is always blah, blah, blah. It's always in this particular position. And I said, why? And how many treatments have you had? Why doesn't it stay? Oh no, it's just always like that. And it reminded me of, in chiropractic, how people always have the same levels of subluxations. And I said, no, this doesn't seem right to me. I'm not going to settle for that. I'm going to figure out, why does this repeatedly happen? What can we do to help stabilize the organs so they're not like falling all the time? And so that's been part of my quest over the years, is to figure out all the other systems involved, and then to realize, oh my God, it's not just the vascular, it's not just the lymphatic. We have to have right muscle tone, right muscle action. We have to have right breathing patterns. We have to have right posture. We have to have right movement. Like there's a whole complex of being in the body. It's not just one thing. You can't just be passive, like, oh, I'm going to take this thing that's over here and move it over there. That's not the way it works. And so to really have this kind of like rehabilitation or renewal, a reintegration, a remembering of who we are in our bodies is far more complex than just one technique. And what I always say is that the body should be self-regulating. The body should be self-regulating. You should not need a chiropractor. You should not need a manual therapist. You should not need an acupuncturist to put you back together every so often. When we have the body systems functioning properly and we're breathing properly, we're moving properly, we have active muscles, we have a life that is well modulated without too much stress, then the body should self-regulate. And that's what we're going towards. That's what we're going towards.